Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Rose Tinted Ceilings podcast. Today we have a special guest, Denise. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Hello, I'm Denise. I am a business coach and mom to three little boys and just living the dream.
First of all, before we get into actual topic, what's it like being a mom of three boys? Because I know a lot of people
A lot of
are very
boys.
strongly like boy mothers. So is it like fun for you? Do you love it?
I do love it. I have an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 4-year-old. And I will say we have a very loud house. There's a lot of energy, and my biggest rule is if you're going to wrestle, you must be outside in the grass. So I'm not going to say they can't wrestle, they just have to be safe wrestling.
That's a good
Yes,
rule.
yeah, that's a pretty valid suggestion. Well, in a house like that, you kind of need like a way to quiet that down, right, Shirley? And would you say that
We do
like what
try.
you do at
We do try to keep it quiet, but it is pretty hard. Two of my boys have ADHD, which makes them a little bit louder and a little bit more rowdy. So we do sometimes implement I don't like to I do say it's timeout, but it's not really timeout. It's really like just we all need a break, go to your room for just a little bit so we can all have a moment to just quietly get ourselves together and then we'll all come back together.
That's good. I like that. It's really a healthy way to handle it rather than saying, "Hey, be quiet" or something
timeout?
like that. It's more inclusive. It's
Well,
great.
I do have to try really hard because like I said with children with ADHD, it is especially difficult because their brains are so different. Um, so I've been reading more about it because not only I a business coach for women with ADHD, but I also have children with ADHD and I have ADHD. But that's a whole nother topic. But with my boys, what I've learned is your brain is on average point 0.3 multiply a normal. Sorry, I'm having a moment. Like, how do I explain that? Um,
Like point three
multiply
more
the
active?
child's multiply the child's age by zero point 0.7, which, 30% less. So zero point 0.7. And then you will get the like executive function of their brain age. So let's say you have a
Oh.
10-year-old, well, their executive functions the same as a 7-year-old, basically, which executive functions like the part of your brain that's helping you organize everything and make reasoning decisions and actually like, okay, let's calm down. They're the executive in the brain, literally. So if you think about it like that, when you have ADHD, that really impacts your ability to make good judgments. And so we have to treat our boys differently because they cannot help it. It is their brain is not functioning at an 8-year-old level or a 6-year-old level. They are functioning at a much lower level. They're still bright. They are still very smart. But if you want them to pay attention for long periods of time, that is very challenging because their brain can't do it. Um, which, I mean, ADHD is just such a fascinating topic. And I bet y'all don't know this because why would you know this? But so first of all, ADHD is as common in girls as it is in boys. That's one thing. The second thing is ADHD is 3 times as likely to be diagnosed in boys in elementary the gap changes in like the middle school realm, but it becomes 2 times as likely. And then as girls get older, they're still 1.5 times, like boys are still 1.5 times as likely. So there's a lot of girls in the world who are not diagnosed, but they have it and they don't know it.
Why do you think
And
that is? I'm kind of curious.
girls don't present the same way. So you think when you think of ADHD, you think of the hyperactive boy running around, and that is not the case. First of all, they have relabeled. It is called attention. The attention deficit disorder is no longer listed. It's now all under the ADHD umbrella, and it is. You can have inattentive. You can have the hyperactivity slash impulsivity, or you can have a combination. So why I don't think girls are as commonly diagnosed is partially because it's called masking. You learn how to cope with it by acting differently. So the world won't notice. And it's not intentional, but you find ways around it. So for instance, I was diagnosed with ADHD at 35 because my son, when he was diagnosed, I realized I have almost the exact same tendencies. So for girls, we don't tend to be as hyperactive, or we hide it really well. For example, you won't be able to see, but my legs are moving under the desk. I can't sit still, but I didn't know that was like something. Or, a fidget with a necklace, or, you start doing things. You don't even realize you're doing it. Or like in class, I had a really hard time focusing in class. I was usually daydreaming, writing poetry, really, because I was bored, and I was like, I'm off in la la land, so I'm doing stuff. I think for girls, we just don't realize like those are actually all pointing to signs of ADHD, but because we're not causing problems, we go under the radar, which is
Would you
not good.
say that the concept of like masking and kind of like pushing those behaviors back down, do you think that could be a reason why a lot of girls don't even know that they could possibly have ADHD?
Absolutely. Well, when you think about it like this, you only know your own experience, right? So you're the only one who understands your brain, and you're just going to assume that everyone else has the same type of brain. They think the same way as you do, it functions the same way. So it's very hard to say, well, is that something, when you're just like, but that's how I am. So I don't know what you're talking about. And so for me, it was very challenging, even as an adult, to admit that maybe I had ADHD. I didn't really want to go there too, because then it made me feel like maybe I wasn't as smart. Maybe there was like, or I felt guilty for saying, well, I think I have ADHD, when there are actually people who have this thing. Like, how dare I consider myself part of that group? Um, I did go to a doctor though to get diagnosed, because it really helped me to realize, yes, I did have it, and I could step out into the world and say, yes, this is real. I have this too. Another reason it is so often misdiagnosed is because many people with ADHD also have anxiety and depression, which in its own way sometimes hides the ADHD. So you may think I'm just really anxious, but it may actually be the ADHD causing your anxiety. The ADHD may actually cause the depression. So they're called comorbidities. You can have both too. And the ADHD may actually be the driving force in why you have these other things.
That's really interesting. I've heard quite a bit where people did say like, I had ADHD and depression, but I had no idea that ADHD could cause depression. So that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing. But I'm really curious how you mentioned briefly about how you almost felt like the sense of like, I want to say like imposter syndrome, where you're like, I cannot possibly have
Mhm.
ADHD because these people do, and I don't think we're the same. So do you think you kind of talk about like why people might feel this way?
Well, I think it's because when you think about whenever you start saying, well, I think that I have something not good and other people actually have it, you almost feel this sense of guilt, like, should I be lumping myself into this group? I think you can say the same thing about depression. If people are saying, well, I'm feeling depressed, and then you're like, are you feeling depressed? Like, you'll know if you're feeling depressed, actually. A lot of times it's not just it may not look the same way on on paper. It's not just a sadness, for example. It's a heaviness. It's a being tired. It's a lot of things that people don't understand. So it goes above and beyond just I am sad. And so I think when you're asking about the imposter syndrome, I think it's just that same level of, so I think with the imposter syndrome, it would be kind of like you almost feel like what would it be? Kind of like Munchausen's munch where you start believing you have, oh, maybe I have this. Oh, maybe I also have that. Oh, maybe. So I feel like with ADHD, when you start exploring if you have it, sometimes you're like, is it fair to say I have it if I haven't been diagnosed? When I know there are some people who it has definitely hindered them. It's something that they actively are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. How can I claim that I'm part of that group without an actual diagnosis?
Right. This kind of brings me to ask. You mentioned that you coach women in business who have ADHD. So I'm curious if some of these women may have had these issues that you mentioned, these feelings of self doubt, and how you might have had a part in kind of helping coach them with that.
So, and just like in school, you have to do things differently if you have ADHD. So, with a lot of women in business, what happens is the normal way of doing things, it just feels like, why is everyone else getting it, but this doesn't work for me? So, a lot of times they have very, many coaches have very like, just do this, then you're going to do this, then you're going to do this. That doesn't work for people with ADHD because we have a lot of, first off, we have a lot of big dreams. We're a lot of times the dreamers in the world. We're the people who think that everything can be idealistic and we're just going to try to build out these big dreams. Um, Try to talk to anyone with ADHD who doesn't have a city built in their brain. Like, that's just the way we function. But in business, the hard thing is you can't just build the city out in one day. You have to actually do the little bits of labor to build a business. So that's really hard for someone with ADHD because you're talking about being very uh, consistent, and you have to ride the waves of your brain, which is a little trickier since we are more geared towards dopamine hits because that's what's going to help our brain to function. And so when it gets a little tedious, that's when people with ADHD usually go, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this. And they'll go down another rabbit hole because that's going to give them a dopamine hit. So, how do you keep somebody actually focused And that's where a lot of times I work with my women that I work with on affirmations, because affirmations can really change the way your brain works. Um, as a math major and somebody who's very mathematically and science oriented, uh, I am a firm believer in affirmations from the science perspective. And so, for the way that I try to help my women understand why affirmations are so powerful is because think about your brain real quick and think about the way that information travels through your brain. It travels through neural pathways. Okay. And those neural pathways, depending on what you've done, they get deeper and deeper and deeper as you learn them. So let's say when you're first learning to read, the more you read, the more you know the words, the more you know the words, the faster you get. And those pathways get deeper and deeper and deeper. And it makes it easier and easier to travel along the pathway. So the reason that affirmations are so wonderful is because a lot of times we have a lot of negative self-talk. Um, and especially with people with ADHD, they've been told they're not very good at things. They've been asked, why aren't you paying attention? Come on, stay focused. What's wrong with you? Like they start to internalize these negative words and they get frustrated because they see everyone else is able to stay focused, and why can't I do what they're doing? So, affirmations are starting to speak positive words to yourself about the possibility of something that you desperately want. I'm not talking about like the possibility of becoming the next Taylor Swift. Like, unless you're a really amazing artist, sure, you can tell yourself that. But it's actually supposed to be something that's reasonable that you can try to obtain. And the reason that that's so powerful is because when you tell yourself, let's say, I'm going to study and make an A on the next test. Well, if you're telling yourself this over and over again, what's going to happen is you're going to show up believing, if I study, I'm going to get an A. So I will get an A on that test because I'm showing up. And you'll show up and you'll show up and you'll show up. And ironically, you'll get the A because you kept showing up because you told yourself, I'm going to get an A. So it's the self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, yes, you may not actually get the A, but you definitely were closer to your goal because you told yourself you were going to do it than if you had said, this is too hard. I'm not going to get an A. So I'm going to try to study, but what's the point? That's what affirmations do. They help you to stay consistent. They help you to be resilient, and they help you to start believing that it's possible. So
I
you're
really
you're
like how
rewriting your neural pathways.
it's really interesting how you kind of framed affirmations not as like a just like a I'm gonna get an A, I'm gonna get an A, but also like adding the work in there, like the I'm gonna study, and that's gonna get me an A. Because when I first heard of affirmations, I would tell myself, I would think like, there's no way I could tell myself I'm gonna get an A, and I'm gonna get an A with no work done. But like now you're saying like the missing puzzle pieces, the work part. I have to also put in the work. So that kind of changed things a bit. So thank you
Yes.
so much for sharing that bit of it.
Yes. And that's why for example, I mean, y'all are doing a podcast, so the work you have to put in to actually get the people interested, keep the word going, actually building it out. That doesn't take overnight. It takes a bit of time to actually build an audience and to keep growing your audience. So, for a businesswoman, the same concept. You are not going to have your business overnight. So, that's why affirmations are so important. You have to keep yourself showing up, even on the days when you're not sure it's working. And the best way to do that is to believe that it's going to work so that you actually show up. Because if you're like, I don't think anyone's going to listen to this podcast, I bet you guys would probably go, then why am I doing this? No one cares. So
So would you
that's
say
why
that
I love
I
your
like
teach so
emphasis.
much affirmation.
so
Yeah.
would you say like negative affirmations in a way like saying like, oh, I can't do this. I won't get an A. Is that almost like nearly the same like level of effectiveness as the positive ones? Like is like negative self-talk like equally as harmful as good ones are powerful?
I would say yes, because it's going to cause self fulfilling prophecy at that point.
Mm,
Because if you're like, I'm not going to do well on this test, you're probably not going to be able to study very well because you're going to have a very negative energy to yourself. You're not going to be focusing. You're going to be down on yourself. You're not going to be in a good space. And you're going to be worried and anxious. That's not a good combination for actually like staying focused. And so if you are being very hard on yourself, you're more likely to do exactly what you said. I'm not going to get a good grade. Well, then you're probably not going to get a good grade just because you unfortunately self fulfilled the prophecy.
mm. Now, I'm sure affirmations are again like mostly personal, but are there any like generalized ones you can put out to our audience right now that you would think would be helpful just as a little like wake me up in the morning?
Oh, wake up ones. Oh, so I have a few that I use. Like one of my favorites that I tell myself, I will do less better. And that's because we put so much pressure on ourselves to do so much. And then we don't really do very well at that so much. So I like to tell myself I don't have to do everything, but I'd rather do less and be better at the things I'm doing less of so that I know that I'm able to give the energy I want to those things. I also really like I have enough energy for what's most important today.
Fingers
Oh, I
crossed.
said about the energy, like I have enough energy for my top priorities today. I like that one just so that, it starts to tell you you're able to prioritize what's most important. And that way, if you didn't get it done, it's not that it was something like, oh, I'll beat myself up for not getting something done, but it's actually, I didn't have enough energy for that today. And
Mm,
it's okay. I can do it tomorrow if it's important. So, like, being kinder to yourself and telling
mm,
yourself that you can't do everything every single day, but you can do what's most important. And that's all you really can ask.
No, I
mm,
yeah, I like the idea of being more accepting to yourself and being
mhm,
kinder to yourself, but also being able to say those affirmations to yourself to push yourself to do less better. I like that.
mhm.
Yeah, there are so
And
many. And affirmations are a very personal thing. It's kind of that thing in your life that you are hoping for. Like, Isabella, what's going on in your life that you are like, I really want this to come true?
Oh, I really want to get an A on my science finals.
There you go.
Like the idea of being more accepting to yourself and being
mhm,
kinder to yourself, but also being able to say those affirmations to yourself to push yourself to do less better. I like that.
mhm.
Yeah, there are so
And
many. And affirmations are a very personal thing. It's kind of that thing in your life that you are hoping for. Like, Isabella, what's going on in your life that you are like, I really want this to come true?
Oh, I really want to get an A on my science finals.
There you go. And what you would say to yourself, and just keep, when your brain starts to say, oh, this is too hard, or oh, I don't know what, like, I don't want to do this. You just keep telling yourself, you can say multiple things. You can say, my hard work pays off. You can kind of go that route, or you can say, I'm going to get an A on my science final. Science is easy for me. Like
Science is easy. I'll use
you
that.
you can, they're very personal. Whatever's resonating with you, that latches on, and like, oh, that feels lighter. I feel better. I feel like I want to go take that on now and do the work. Because, like I said, the affirmations, it's not about like, it just happens like poof, now everything's beautiful and lovely. No, I mean, you still have to do the work, but it helps to at least get you to a place where your mind is not putting up roadblocks and saying, well, you can't do it, you can't do it. Like, how are you going to be able to get an A if your brain is like, you can't get an A, Isabella, what's the point? They're very personal. Whatever's resonating with you, that latches on, and like, oh, that feels lighter. I feel better. I feel like I want to go take that on now and do the work. Because, like I said, the affirmations, it's not about like, it just happens like poof, now everything's beautiful and lovely. No, I mean, you still have to do the work, but it helps to at least get you to a place where your mind is not putting up roadblocks and saying, well, you can't do it, you can't do it. Like, how are you going to be able to get an A if your brain is like, you can't get an A, Isabella, what's the point?
100%.
Sorry
Now
about
we
that.
are
And
gonna have
Maggie,
to message
what's
you.
something you're trying to reach for?
I would like
Yeah, so
to
what's your thing,
not
Maggie? Let's
fail.
come up with an affirmation for you.
I need to not fail my gym class this
Not fail.
semester. I currently have a C in gym class. I needed to not fall so I can graduate high school. That is the
See,
goal.
exactly. So it's kind of that same concept of gym class is easy for me. I enjoy gym class. This may not feel very true, but wouldn't it be nice if it was true, so that you
Oh
would show
yeah.
up and go, oh, this is super simple. I got this. I'm not going to fail because it's not that bad. Like, you're not trying to, so one thing I like to tell people too about affirmations, you're not trying to do a silver lining on something. You're not trying to, um like, if you have some strong emotions about something, like you failed a test, you're not going to magically use an affirmation to get past it, because that can also cause damage to for you, because you're no longer processing your emotions, and therefore, like, you're trying to stop an emotion. I'm not
Mhm.
going to let myself feel these things. That's not what affirmations are for. You should still process what you're feeling. The affirmation is once you've spent some time processing, and you kind of know when that's happened, right? Like, you're feeling calmer and like, well, what do I do now? That's when you can use an affirmation to get you on the right path. But it should never replace, like, if you need to grieve or anything like
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. I think that's definitely an important note to have. Well,
Yes.
we don't want to keep you from your kid for too long. I'm sure he needs you. So we'll make sure to let you know once Isabella gets an A on her science final and I
Yes.
don't fail the class I need to graduate. So, is there any
Yes.
last thing you want to shout out to the audience?
Well, I will say one last thing. First of all, if the affirmation doesn't come true, it doesn't mean anything past the fact that you still got further along than you would have.
Hmm.
So be kind to yourself on your journey as you're doing affirmations, because they're not supposed to make you perfect overnight. You're not going to fulfill every affirmation that you use. It's not really for that. It's for helping you build resilience. It's helping you to keep going. It's helping you to think more positively about yourself.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so much for
much,
coming
Denise.
on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank y'all for having me. And I hope I hear more from y'all.
You will. As